Alrighty, so we're in office hours. As typical, what we will be doing today is going over kind of updates from the Semantic Kernel team, and then we'll open it up for questions. I don't believe we have any demos or special topics planned. Sophia, can you confirm or deny if that's true?
Yeah, confirming no special topics, but if anyone does have a demo or anything that they'd love to showcase, I would love to be able to see that, but nothing pre-planned.
Alrighty, perfect. And if there are special topics that you are interested in, remember we have the office hours email alias. I'll drop that in the chat in a bit. Or Sophia, if you're able to do that, let us know, and Sophia can help coordinate those sessions. Alrighty. In terms of updates, it's been kind of a whirlwind on our blog. So let's just go ahead and go to check that out real quick. Okay. So in the last couple days, we've announced two major updates. One is around our Python library, and the other one is Java. So our Python SDK is now in beta. So I know this crowd is pretty heavily .NET, but we do get a few occasional Python developers every so often. We want to change that. We want to start growing the Python community for Semantic Kernel. And this beta is really our first step to make sure that the Python SDK not only has parity with .NET, but also has the same concepts, the same structure, the same names, all of that good stuff, so that if you are working in a hybrid team with both Python and .NET, you can really use the same language as you're developing. Okay. So we have a ton of great updates. There's still quite a few things that we still have on our backlog that we're planning. This is just a reminder, everything that we develop, everything that we do is in the open, is public. And so again, this is our Python backlog, and everything that's kind of marked as high is what we are aiming to get done for build, so that we can have our v1.0 moments. And if you notice, we're going pretty dang fast. So the team is actually hoping that maybe by mid-April, we'll have a release candidate of the Python library that pretty much has complete parity with the .NET library. Okay. Similarly, if we check out our Java blog, they are at release candidates. So they've actually moved a little bit even faster than our Python library. And we're really excited about the Python SDK because there's so much interest in using OpenAI with Java. I don't know if we have a huge Java group on this particular call, but again, I expect that to change. We're going to get more folks interested as we ship things out. And what I'm probably most excited about the new Java SDK is one of the most powerful things that came with the V1 of .NET was auto function calling, right? Giving the AI a bunch of plugins. So here we can see we're creating a plugin and we're giving it to our kernel, and having that LLM, having that agent automatically call 1, 2, 3, as many number of functions as necessary until it has the ability to give a result back to the user. So that's now available in Java. And so for all of our friends building Spring applications or whatever they might be doing in the enterprise space, that is now available for them. Okay. So I'll just take a pause there and see if there's any questions. We'll be having additional blogs later this week on, we have a really great migration guide that's actually already live. So I can just show you that real quick for the .NET space. And we've also heard a lot of demand around how do you architect, how do you think about building AI applications. So we're going to start a series around that. And I think the first blog post for that will be later today. So just for folks to know, we have this migration guide that you can use. Okay. I believe someone had a question.
Yeah, any chance for a TypeScript library in the future?
TypeScript library. So we don't have any official plans, but I will say at the leads level, we've started feeling the pain ourselves. We're wanting to build applications where maybe you have a .NET backend, but you have obviously your JavaScript front end, and how do you actually have these things talk together? So we don't have anything formal to share, and I know there's like the real need would be a full TypeScript SDK so that you could deploy it using Node. But what we're kind of talking about right now is what if we had a phased approach where we at least like included types and all that good stuff and help that communication layer until we had a full thing. Again, I don't have anything concrete to share, and our calendar is very booked up until build, so it might be after that. But we do feel the need ourselves. We are interested in supporting those types of scenarios. Perfect. Good question. Good question. All righty. Any other questions about our different SDKs? That was a great one. Any other languages that we should be aware of? Besides the 3 we support today, TypeScript is probably the next biggest one. All righty.
There's another question in the chat.
Yeah. Okay. So now that we've covered the updates from the Semantic Kernel team, let's go ahead and go to general questions. So Ludovic asks, question 1, I wonder if there's any reason why an AI model like GPT-4 would output an incomplete with duplicate data response when using inline code, whereas when using the Semantic Kernel extension on VS Code, the same prompt output and clear and complete response without duplicates. Ludovic, are you able to come off mute? The part that's confusing me is duplicates. What exactly are you running into in terms of duplicate data? Ludovic, are you still there? It shows that you're unmuted, but we cannot hear you. We cannot hear you. Okay, he'll come back. Okay. While we're waiting for Ludwig to rejoin, Tim asked for Python, any ideas when V1 will be out? Thank you, Evan, for kind of sharing our roadmap for Python. Our goal is to have everything done by build, but as I kind of called out, we're going much faster than we expected, and a lot of that is attributed to community members starting to help out with the Python library. So this is just a reminder, folks. You can obviously contribute back to Semantic Kernel if you have the time and you have the passion and the energy. We actually have our Python contributor meeting right after this. So if you want to help move V1 even faster, definitely join that half hour and we can talk about issues that you may or may not be able to pick up. Righty. Ludovic, I see you're back again. Are you able to try one more time? You might just have to, if you're still not hearing you, we might just have you type in some additional clarification on what you mean by duplicate data. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure why you would be seeing different results. You should see the same. The only other thought I might have is the thing that we have in the SK extension. I believe it uses more of the text completion or text generation APIs. And you might be using, actually, no. If you're using GPT-4 on both of them, it should be the same. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. So let's take a look at the other question. What is the difference between Jinja 2 file used in LLM and prompt? Can embedding be sent to them? And how is the syntax should look like? Are you thinking about a specific session about prompt with Jinja 2? Oh, this is a great question. So for those of you that are not Python developers, Jinja 2 is a template engine language that is specific to Python, right? So if you have been using the .NET library, you're probably familiar with like the OG semantic kernel syntax with like the curly braces, right? And then we introduced support for the handlebars templating language, right? So that you can do things like for loops and stuff. Jinja is kind of the equivalent of handlebars inside of Python. We do not have support for Jinja templates today in our Python SDK, but it is on our roadmap and we would like to support it. It won't be the first class template language that we will support in Semantic Kernel, though, because one of the value props, one of the reasons why we do want to have these different SDKs for different languages is to support these hybrid team scenarios. So if you build a prompt, if you build an agent using, say, handlebars inside of Python or Liquid, which is another cross-language templating language, one of the values is as your Python dev, which is typically the machine learning expert, you can do things like build it, evaluate it, make sure that it actually works. And when you're ready to deploy it, instead of deploying it with Python, because maybe you don't have the expertise as an app developer to do deployments to tens of thousands of customers, you would give those exact same resources written in handlebars to your app developers using .NET or Java so that they could deploy those prompts for you inside of the broader application, right? So if you're entirely Python shop, go for it. Use Jinja, have fun. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of support in other languages. So that's the one caveat that I would add. All righty. Okay, JPack asks, docs look kind of incomplete. It just shoots you through a tutorial, but I can't find a good documentation that explains things good and how they are supposed to be used, both for Semantic Kernel and for prompt flow, which is about out of scope. Any plans to do a complete doc? So I see Sophia just gave a thumbs up. So she's actually working right now. She's doing a compete analysis across our different I wouldn't say competitors, but like similar languages or similar SDKs like LangChain and even not so similar SDKs out there to see what's the best way of providing that documentation. And then we'll be doing some updates. Sophia, I don't know if you want to come off mute and kind of share.
I was about to add in, yeah, I really appreciate the feedback we've been going through to look at. If there are specific samples or specific things that individuals would find valuable, please feel free to reach out to me directly or on the email alias I left in chat as well. We'd love to be able to get your feedback as we're going through the update, but it is something top of mind that we're looking to get through.
Perfect. And one of the main things I've heard, you said like explain things that are good. I'll take that as like what is the best canonical way of actually building an application, both at the high level and even in the weeds. So I know Sophia is going to be publishing a blog post at kind of a high level, how you should be thinking about architecting these different agents. And I believe if it hasn't already been merged in today, maybe tomorrow, how to do dependency injection with Semantic Kernel. So docs is very top of mind for us, and you should expect improvements over the next several weeks and continually as we add features to Semantic Kernel. Thank you. Carlos asks, AI in a box has been helpful to ramp up with SK. Couldn't agree more. If y'all haven't tried out Semantic Kernel in a box, I don't know if Evan or Sophia, if y'all can link to it. One of my favorite pieces about the AI in the box, the Semantic Kernel version, is it actually shows you how to integrate it with Bot Framework, which is a very, very common scenario for Microsoft folks. Hey, I want my agent to be inside of Teams. I want my agent inside of WhatsApp. I want my agent as an embedded panel inside of my application. That's a really great resource to get started. Okay. Tim asks, was wondering something similar. Notice some of the samples linked in the SK docs don't match the recent 0.9 changes. Are those slated to be updated? Great question. So when we did, I'm assuming this is related to Python. Most of the samples have been updated. There is one big exception. We chose purposely not to update the prompt flow samples with Semantic Kernel 0.9 because those environments have not been updated to 0.9 yet. We're working with the prompt flow team to update those, and then those samples will be updated. I'm also just realizing, I'm assuming what you're referring to. Oh no, this is a miss on my part. So y'all can all send y'all's pitchforks and fires my way. My guess is what's happened is I bet I did not update this link right here. So I bet if I click on this, it still goes to the old stuff. It sure does. It sure does. So we'll get that fixed. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and link to y'all the correct location for the updated samples. We've moved them into our main repo. So if we go to Python and go to samples, and we go to documentation samples, all of the updated code is here. I'll go ahead and paste that here. And if you do read our current docs, let's see, where are they? While these links are broken, I'll get those fixed. All of the code snippets that are inside of here are referring to the new samples in our main repo. Okay, that's where this is coming from. So if you go to the Python filter, all of this is using the 0.9 code. All right, thank you for calling that out. Better to get that fixed sooner rather than later. Okay. Carlos asked, I'm building my POC using the Chroma connector. It's 1.5.0 alpha at the moment. I have 6 months planned release. Any guidance on the risk profile of using Chroma would be good. So we'll have an updated connector. You said 6 months. Well before that, our plan is to have all of those updated by build. I would say that for a lot of folks that want to use memory connectors like Chroma, or if you're using Azure AI Search, probably the best way for you to have flexibility, because our connectors kind of constrain you a bit, that's why they're still alpha, is to build a custom plugin. I'm really happy to say that we have a sample now that kind of demonstrates what that looks like and kind of demystifies that process of building a custom plugin that talks to your vector database. So if we go into our .NET folder and we go into our wonderful kernel syntax examples, Azure AI Search. This one, of course, is a sample that's specific to Azure AI Search, but you could replicate similar behavior for Chroma or whatever vector DB that you're using. I'm going to go ahead and link that here. But we'll see just kind of how simple this is, but we create a custom plugin down here. Yeah, plugin. In most cases, if you're doing RAG, the only thing you really need is a plugin that performs search. So here you can see we've created a plugin. It has a single method inside of it called search, and then you're able to use whatever APIs your vector DB has in order to retrieve those results. And because it's search, it should be relatively easy. Here you can see where we're getting that embedding and giving it to the search service. If you're an Azure AI Search user, this has been particularly helpful because it allows you to use hybrid search with Semantic Kernel, which isn't possible today with our current connectors. Okay. So just again, this is the short-term how to unblock yourself and actually give yourself more flexibility than we'll ever be able to provide. And in the medium term, as we get closer to build over the next month and a half, we'll be updating our connectors so that they are non-experimental. Okay. And then Tim, Sophia, one major thing would be great to see in Semantic Kernel docs, better clarification, definition of terminology in relationship with other packages. Ooh, I really like that, and that'd be really easy for us to do. So yeah, I'll work with Sophia, and I can work together and get that in. Yeah, you called out LangChain, Llama Index, AutoGen. There's so many, so many projects out there. It'd be great to have just like a glossary that explains them all. Mohammed then asked, is Office Hours Recordings uploading to the Alex YouTube channel? This is a great question. So last week we actually had, we canceled. So folks that showed up, we kindly said, oh, we have a rest week this week. We'll do a better job of communicating in advance if we have a cancellation. But I was unfortunately traveling at the time. Moving forward, our plan is to actually start posting all the blog posts, all of our office hours to our blog, so that Alex doesn't have to always publish them to his personal YouTube. So yeah, Last week, there was no recording. There wasn't a session. Don't worry, you didn't miss anything. And moving forward, we're going to be working on publishing them to our blog. Tristan asks, ooh, Matthew, is this now the version that we can expect to stabilize on? And he referenced to a previous chat where we talked about updating Chat Copilot. Yes. So I think last session I said, oh, Chat Copilot will never update it. It's sad. We want to support you if you run into issues. Thanks to the community giving us feedback of, hey, like this is important. This wasn't just kind of a research project for us. Like we're actually deployed it to our customers. We took that feedback and we worked on actually updating it to, forget at the time, 1.4, 1.5. There's a few changes if you were using the old planner capabilities. That's been updated a bit to reflect the new planners inside of Semantic Kernel, but most of the goodness is still there. So yes, I'd recommend if you are using an old version of Chat Copilot, you can now update to a long-term supported version of Semantic Kernel. Question. Okay. And then Jutty asks, this is using 091B. So the thing I linked to was a C# example, which I think is 1.5. We currently don't have a Python example of the same thing. So if Jetty, if you're trying to build a custom memory connector for Python, you may have to just kind of reference the .NET version for the time being. Alrighty. Jordan, can you elaborate on how the new Assistant API keeps track of user chat history, thread ID, length of time the chat history is maintained, how it is maintained, and what happens if I had a different deployment of the model, one that uses P2s versus one that uses Paygo? Is the chat history available across models? Assistance API. Awesome. So I guess the first, let's take a look at some Assistance API docs. I think that might be helpful. So if we go to the OpenAI docs and we go to their API, let's go ahead and go to Assistance. One of the first things to call out is they have these different objects, these top-level objects as part of the Assistance API. There's obviously the assistants themselves that include things like, what is its name? What do you call it? What can it do? What is its internal instructions? What tools does it have, right? And this is kind of this floating thing that can do a bunch of stuff. And separate from that, similar to how when you're calling a chat completion API with a chat history object, you also have what they call a thread. Right? And a thread persists all of the messages that are happening. And the key thing I want you to kind of take note of is this isn't an API that's inside of an assistant, right? A thread isn't owned by an assistant. It is its own object that kind of floats around in the ether. And what this means is you can create these threads. You can give these threads to multiple different assistants. And so to kind of answer your other question, if you do have assistants backed by different models, you kind of had a few different examples of different deployment types, but it could be as radical as like one AI uses 3.5 turbo and another one uses 4. It doesn't matter. You can give this thread to any of those assistants, right? Now, to answer your other question about how does this stuff persist behind the scenes, I'm not entirely sure where it gets stored, but I'm assuming it's something like Cosmos DB. These threads are persisted. I'm not sure how it's been implemented in Azure AI. And if I did know, I don't know if I could publicly share how that's kind of implemented, but it is stored in some sort of persistent file store, right? And I believe it's maintained until you come around and actually clean it up and delete it. So it is important for you to kind of prune things over time, right? And I think that answers most of your questions. Yeah, that should have. And I guess, Jordan, if you want to come off mute, if there's any follow-ups that you have.
Sure. Is there anything specific we need to know around using semantic kernel to call those assistance APIs?
Great question. I don't think so. So right now, our abstractions on top of it are pretty one-to-one with it. So basically, you use it with semantic kernel, and we make it like almost a direct one-to-one call with it. So I as long as you understand the assistance API docs, you should be okay on the semantic kernel side. I will say I don't know if that will always be true. So we're currently working on abstracting our agent paradigm and our abstractions so that they can work on autogen agents and the custom agent you built, the assistant agent, maybe an agent built with Llama Index, right? There's all these different places that have agents. And because of that, we are having to change things a little bit, and it might not map as clearly to one with the assistance API, especially the thread pieces. If and when that happens, we'll probably have to provide some guidance on, hey, here's the internal logic that we're using to kind of align these different concepts across these different products. But right now, no, I would say it's pretty simple. Cool. And you might be asking, oh, well, Matthew, if it's all just one-to-one, what value is there in using semantic kernel over the assistance API? The main value, if you've been using the .NET version of semantic kernel, automatic function calling is the bee's knees. It's amazing, right? You just give it your functions, you ask it to address a user question, and it can just pull these things, right? That logic of us taking functions as plugins and describing it to the LLM, it's a non-trivial amount of work. It's fairly complex. And that is the same thing that we do for the assistance API, right? And so I have found it much easier to work with the assistance API with semantic kernel because I don't have to like handcraft, oh, this is the description of a tool. No, I can just say, here's a plugin from semantic kernel. It all just kind of magically works, and the assistant can start doing things. Jeti provided a link to something else. Let's see. Yes, so all of the new Python documentation examples, they are using 0.9. Yeah. So this was all written by Evan Matson, who's the primary developer of the Python library. And you can see all this was built over the weekend, just in time for our blog post on the new version. Okay, right. If Sophia or Evan, if you don't mind replying in chat, since it looks like Jyoti had a drop. Okay, Jess asked, are you aware of any plans for semantic kernel or something like semantic kernel to be rolled natively into .NET itself? Great question. So we're having conversations with the .NET team. I'm kind of like, how do we make semantic kernel like the set of abstractions for AI, right? So we're having those conversations. We'll always be Microsoft.semantickernel. Whatever it is, right? But internally within Microsoft, we are positioning semantic kernel as the set of abstractions. And one thing I guess to note, like if we take a look at the, if you don't believe me, if we open up the .NET 9 blog post where they shared their vision, semantic kernel has two very clear callouts, right? The .NET team really does see semantic kernel as kind of this core set of abstractions for the AI space. What they are doing right now for .NET are like the super primitives. So things like tensor primitives for .NET. And we will continue to sit at the layer we are that allows you to kind of describe a plugin and function and all these different model content types for AI. Great question. Mohammed asks, Matthew, is there any sample available for local LLM with semantic kernel on Azure Cato? So Azure Cato in particular, I don't think so. Let's just take a look at it. Azure Cato, Kubernetes AI toolchain operator. This is amazing. Okay, cool. So I'd have to read more about this. What we have been fortunate is we've seen that most of these local model providers, so your LLM Studio, your OLLamas, insert name here, most of them do use the Open API, my brain's breaking, API. So it looks the same, it behaves the same. They clearly do this to make it easy for people to kind of switch between OpenAI models and local models. And so we do have a sample for local model providers that do use the Open API. OpenAI API. I'm just going to pull that up here so that I can share it with all of you. I think, if I remember correctly, did it ever? Okay, it's still in review, but the sample is still pretty good. I want to share this with all of you. And then the TLDR is when you add a local model as a chat completion, all you're really doing is creating a custom HTTP client that points to a different URL, and because it's localhost, you'll change it to a local endpoint. Okay, and then what's nice is you can then use the OpenAI chat completion connector, and everything will just be routed to your local provider. Okay, so I'll have to take a look into more the. Oh, I wasn't sharing my screen. So here you can see we're creating this new client with this custom message handler that is pointing to localhost. Okay. So I'm not super familiar with the Azure Cato yet. I want to take a look at it. I want to read up on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost same thing. Like Cato, I mean, you can provision GPU node in AKS cluster. And then I think limited model, they starting supported. It's from Microsoft only. There is one demo also run by that guy. So Phi 2 recently supported, right? And then Phi 2 model you can run within that GPU node. And it is basically exposing one endpoint the way you are showing this LM Studio example, right? And then he basically suggested, okay, same, I mean, simple HTTP client you can use and then kind of you can call, right? But my point is that kind of in a semantic kernel way, right? The way kind of we orchestrate, right? Is this possible? Or something kind of more complex scenario, let's say I wanted to use function calling and all, whether those are possible or not with local model. So I having doubt, right? So yeah, this is where I'm asking. Yeah.
Yes. So it depends on the model. So there are a handful. I think last time I went on Hugging Face, there was like 3 models that I've seen that have function calling. And we are planning on doing some tests on our side to make sure that they actually work. But there are some that do support function calling. The main question I have, though, is if the author of Azure Cato respects the tool attributes as part of the OpenAI API. If they do, and they also support those models, then everything should just magically work. But that's the main gap that I could foresee because it's not the first thing I'd assume a developer like that would build.
I think only a couple of models supported in Cato. One is Phi. Recently they started supporting. Then Mistral is there, and Falcon is there. So I think 3-4 only. The name few only.
So if you already have this set up, and you're trying it. Give it a whirl, and if it explodes on you, please create an issue. I'd love to be able to address any problems that you're running into. I know local models
Sure.
are huge.
Right. Sure. Thank you.
Ooh, you got me excited. You got me excited. Okay. Ludwig asks about question 1. I meant the semantic kernel inline code will output the completion but stop halfway and repeat itself and then not complete the response, where the SK plugin on VS Code will complete with no repetition. And hopefully the mic is okay. This is strange. Ludwig, if you want to try one more time. If not, this clearly sounds like a bug. If you don't mind creating an issue for us on GitHub, we'll be able to triage it in the morning and then try to get a resolution for you. I think you had a second question. Let's just see. Question 2, what is, oh, I already answered that one. Yeah, okay, we're good. And as a reminder, if folks, if y'all want to raise y'all's hand and like come off mute and ask your question, feel free to do that as well. Jeffrey asks, should we expect to be able to have more control over how chat history is stored and managed for threads when using Azure OpenAI? You currently have a project where we're building out our own chat history data store because we have to have conversation histories available for our analytics teams. It'd be great if we didn't have to build our own data store, but still own the data and control how it replicates to something like Snowflake. Today, no. And I think this is one of the main reasons why we want to make sure we provide kind of a custom built assistance API, because there are limitations to the assistance API. Not only do you not have full control over like how this thing is stored and manipulating it and changing it, so you can only add user messages to it. You can't add assistant or system messages to it. So there is, with all the ease of use that comes with the assistance API, you do lose some control. And we want to make that easier for you over time with semantic kernel agent abstractions. I guess, Jeffrey, if you want to come off mute and share more about kind of the type of control that you're expecting. Is it just being able to retrieve it? Because there are APIs that just retrieve all the messages, or are you also hoping to manipulate the messages as well?
Mostly just retrieve are the use cases that I'm thinking about, but we would like to be able to have these conversations stored in Snowflake so that we can go back and look at, evaluate how well it's doing in, doing follow-up questions. So this is, basically going to be an assistant bot helping people, set up some services. But we won't always get the information that we expect from them. So we're going to have to ask like clarifications, and we want to be able to go back and take a look at like the chat histories and be like, it went off the rails, early on the conversation.
So there is an API on the Assistance API to retrieve all the messages in a thread. So for your particular scenario, I think you might be okay. You might be well served. And I think the hard part is just making sure that whatever data is inside of the Assistance API, whether it's OpenAI or Azure, is correctly replicated and synced appropriately to Snowflake.
Yeah, SK telemetry might also be helpful in that situation if you want to send everything to like App Insights and then query that in the future of what were the asks, what were the results, token usage, all those type of things.
That would be like the custom filters.
Yes, and we do have automatic telemetry that gets spit out. So if you add a logger to like App Insights, you'll get all that telemetry of, oh, these are the requests and here's the token counts, etc. But for your scenarios where you're like, oh, was the request successful or not? You'll obviously have to add some custom telemetry through the filters to achieve that. What else was going to add to that? Okay, that's fine. Steve asks, any discussions of instead of using the LLM auto function calling, using a semantic router? Steve, are you able to come off mute and maybe share a little bit more about what semantic routers are?
Yeah, so I saw an interesting repo pop up about 2 weeks ago. I believe it's in the Python world, but it's pretty simple. It's trying to get the function calling to be a little bit more deterministic. And so what folks are doing is you're basically embedding a dictionary where you can actually take typical questions that are being asked of your LLM and then list them to the correct plugin that it would be addressed to. And so I've had this chatbot in production, and I think we have about a dozen plugins. And our LLM function calling is kind of hitting in like the 70% kind of accuracy of routing. And that seems to be one of our pain points. So I just switched over to Semantic Router last week. In so far, we've had far less misroutes or incorrect plugins being called. It's really simple. It's a dictionary. You embed it, and then you embed the user's question. And I just put the cosine similarity into a C# function, and it's literally just finding a certain cosine similarity above a certain threshold. And then if it doesn't hit above a certain threshold, what I'm doing is just defaulting to the LLM auto function calling. And that has increased. I mean, for us personally, it's increased the accuracy of the plain routing. I'm not sure how widely spread it is. There's like one big repo. It looks like Llama Index just started doing it as well. So I think it's starting to pick up in popularity, but I didn't know if it was on your guys' radar yet or not.
This particular term, I will say no. I'm learning it in real time. But I think we've talked about this pattern in the past. Because I guess what I'm getting is for a particular function, you create a bunch of embeddings, and then when the user request comes in, if the embeddings are close enough, you can just automatically call that function. Is that fair?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And then you're going to teach me. So I guess once you choose the function, do you then use function calling to determine like what the inputs are supposed to be? Is that correct?
I just have the function declared directly and just invoke it.
Oh, so okay. So
it's
do your
like-
functions? Oh, go ahead.
It's like locking in a plan, I think, right? Like using the handlebars, saving that plan that already exists based on the user's question, find the similarity, and then just execute.
You could do it that way too. Yeah, I'm actually I just have the plugins DI'd in, and then I can just execute it directly.
What was going to be a question? Okay, so your functions, they don't have any inputs. Is that fair? They're just like, you call it and you're good to go.
Yeah, most of them you just call them, and then they do their own searching right now. So most of them are just RAG patterns. So they go in. There's some NL SQL, and then there's some standard RAG pattern stuff for unstructured data. The searches are within the plugin, so the plugins are standalone.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then okay, so if they did require inputs, I could imagine kind of a flow of, hey, is it close enough to the user's request through embeddings? Oh, it is. We'll use function calling to fill out the inputs and then invoke it, and life is good. Okay.
Exactly.
And I think what I like a lot about this kind of proposal is what we've seen people do in the past is they'll just kind of create embedding over the entire description or the function or what have you. I like these utterances. I suspect that makes it much more accurate to pick out the right thing.
Yeah, it was an interesting problem that didn't crop up until a couple months into production, right? When you actually have analytics and you can see the analytics of what's being routed and what's not. And then you have those users' questions. So now we can look at, okay, where's the edge cases? And we didn't have a way to kind of hard code those edge cases in. The LLM kept getting the same thing wrong. And so this seemed to be a decent way to control that.
And I also suspect this might be faster.
It is
because
fast.
you do embeddings, right? Yeah,
It is fast. Yeah. It's one less LLM call, one less API call. So it is much faster.
All righty. Well, we'll definitely take a look at this. This is great. Thanks for letting us know.
Cool. Thanks.
Great. Where were we? Evan, okay. Ludovic, sorry, didn't hear the answer on Q2. So I gave a really in-depth answer on your second question, Ludovic. So I highly recommend taking a listen where I kind of talk about what Jinja 2 is and how it relates to the template engines within Semantic Kernel. Okay. Jordan asks, how do the chat history object and the threads concept work together, or will it work together in the future? Oh, I had an hour and a half meeting about this morning. So in most cases, like, you don't have to worry about it. Like, you have your chat history and you use it with the chat completion models, or you have threads and you work with the assistance APIs. Where we're starting to run into this is if you want to have teams of agents that maybe 2 agents use chat history and another 3 agents use threads, how do they actually talk to each other, right? So we're building some abstractions to kind of do some translation between these 2 things. It's a bit early right now. I don't have anything to share, but it is on our radar. I would expect that you aren't running into issues now. Jordan, if you want to come off mute, and if you have a scenario that you want to share, please let us know. But otherwise,
No,
right
I
now,
didn't. I didn't
separate.
have a specific one, but I mean, right now, the chat history object is how I'm managing the state of all of these. But the threads API does the exact same thing. So it seems like those should merge, or maybe the constructor of chat history says, hey, please give me the endpoint of the threads API and I'll stick all your history there.
Yes, you're spot on. So that's where we're going to eventually move.
Okay.
Yep, perfect.
But no, nobody needs that right now. That just seems like the obvious thing that's going to happen.
Yes. Cool. I'm excited for you to see what we end up creating. You can give us some feedback. And then Tristan asks a question that is coming up in our own chat-based solutions.
Should I just come off mute for this one?
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So imagine we've ragged some data and user has a chat history that contains some sensitive data that's used in both the answer and the citations. So at the point in time when they made the request, they had access to that data. Then the user moves in the organization, normal kind of joiners, movers, leavers problem, right? But in this scenario, we invalidate the user's permission to the data that they once had access to at the source. But those but that content is persisted both in the answer in a form and also in the original citation. Although they'd still need to, if they click through to the citation, they would have to have access to that, right? But there's snippets there as well, right? That might be visible and potentially even if the user has access to the transparency behind the conversation, there could be other data in there. So within our own solution, we're thinking about whether we might try to invalidate that or not. It feels like it's in the really hard bucket at the minute, but the same problem also feels to me like it's there in the sticky persistent session in the assistance API, right? And I don't know if there is going to be any way of invalidating that persistence when it should be invalidated. Like imagine you had some data that was that you had to dispose of, like for a compliance need. And it's really normal when you're handling those disposition needs, like a right to be forgotten request or something like that, that you must delete it everywhere, right? How the hell are we going to delete it in the sticky persistent session is the question, but then also, within our own solutions.
So one, I don't know. I'm just going to be brutally honest. This sounds like a hard problem. Question. I'm assuming this is a scenario that comes up today with just humans talking to each other, like in Teams. Like I message someone and I talk about something, and then one day I lose access, but it's still in my Teams messages. Do y'all have similar concerns there? Do you have solutions for addressing that? Help me. Yeah, let's talk this through. What do you think are kind of the differences between those scenarios and how to address them?
That is a great analogy, and I don't think people are typically invalidating chat history between humans as part of a mover's process. So the joiners and the leavers bit of this process is like the leavers bit is, well, you've deleted the account, you've disabled the account, deleted the account, whatever, like that tackles most of the issue in most cases. But yeah, it's the movers scenario, which, to be fair, this is like a pretty fractional consideration, but it is something that I feel like we should at least give some thought to.
And at the very, like, I can see this kind of being an incremental thing that that you do, that we support, etc. Like if there's a citation to a file that a user never has, theoretically, that means you have some sort of hard mapping that you could follow, chase back, and delete. To your point, the assistance API does not give you that control to manipulate the chat history. And so that might be a blocker for you to use that, and may require you to build your own custom agent using something like a semantic kernel, or with the out-of-the-box models. Because without the citation, you're having to basically analyze the entire chat history and see if information is in there, and you'd have to use AI to analyze it. And that sounds expensive.
Yeah. That's something I guess we hadn't really fully considered, is that the bits of the cited content that are used in the answer. It's like, how do you just tear down the bit of the answer that user shouldn't have access to now, when it's it's not the verbatim content anymore.
And like, let's say the agent says, oh, the sky is blue and it came from this document. They lose access to the document. Well, the agent may know that the sky was blue because of another document, right? And so do you remove it or not? So anyway, these are interesting problems.
You can't take it out of people's head either. If Matthew says, hey, this is my address, I've got that. You can't say like, no, sorry, you don't know Matthew anymore. No, I do, I did. So I think it's moving forward is probably the use case. Now, if there's like PII or social security numbers or whatever, okay, you can probably write a quick program. It doesn't even have to be AI to take that out,
And I mean, that is kind of the challenge, is that this is already in the context of people performing investigations. So it's inherently sensitive, but also that means the probability of that person moving to a role where they no longer have access to this data is low.
So if this is a big legal concern for y'all, I would perhaps change I would adjust how it's architected, like have each conversation tied to a particular user object thing that could be terminated, so that
actually permission the conversation itself.
Yes.
Yeah, that's where my thinking was going to. Okay, thank you.
Okay, cool. That was fun. I like that one. So we are at time. There's no more questions. Oh my goodness, how magical. So if there are any other questions, we can probably take one more. You can raise your hand and come off mute. Otherwise, Sophia shared the alias that we have for collecting questions or demos. We love the demos. We'll probably be a little bit more forward in collecting demos so that we can share them for next time. All right, well, I hope this was a valuable use of everyone's time. I learned some things, and I enjoyed hearing about y'all scenarios. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.